From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
It is so good to be back with you. Thank you for joining us after a little hiatus we've had with Sunday Edition. On the program today, we have a lot to talk about. A little later on at the very end of the program, we're going to talk with Senator Jani Iwamoto, who happens to be my state senator, where we are sitting right now. She surprised many of her constituents and many in the Democratic Party by saying this would be her last term in the Senate. And we'll find out why and what is going on and how this session has gone. Also, Evan McMullin has taken an aggressive stance on some of the sanctions and things that Senator Lee has voted against, trips that he has taken to Moscow. We extended an invitation to Senator Lee and also to Evan McMullin. Evan will join us on the program. We'll have a statement from Senator Lee with a promise that he'll join us in the not too far distant future. But in light of everything that's happened in this past week, certainly the Ukraine situation, Vladimir Putin, all the ramifications there, and of course also the State of the Union address by President Biden. We have invited our friend Boyd Matheson, who has inside sources, of course, on KSL Radio that you will hear each and every weekday between 1 and 3 o'clock often. He has appeared on this program. Boyd, thank you so much for agreeing to share some of your thoughts on what's unfolding here on the program.
Oh, great to be with you, Doug, as always.
Let's get a reaction to Joe Biden's State of the Union message just this past week. Rarely have I seen a State of the Union address where, at least with the topic that was first and foremost on everybody's mind, had what appeared to be enthusiastic bipartisan support for our Ukrainian friends. What was your reaction to that part in particular?
Yeah, you know, it's sad that it has to take something like Russia invading Ukraine for members of Congress to come together in a moment around the presidency. And it is really in part due to the fact that the State of the Union has become much more of a political campaign style speech than it has been a report to the Congress and to the people of the country. So I did think it was a great moment of unity. And I think everybody understands in terms of standing with Ukraine. And so those are some really good moments. I think the president could have even taken those further and further galvanized both the country and our allies around the world. You have to remember the president was really speaking to multiple audiences. He had that in front of him there in the well of the United States House, but he was also speaking to our allies around the world, and he was also speaking to Vladimir Putin. And I think he could have been even stronger in terms of the message to Vladimir Putin in terms of where the world is united and that we won't stand for this kind of aggression.
Let's stay on that theme for a while because, again, bipartisan, Washington, D.C., and honestly around the world, including, of course, the people of Ukraine, are calling for even stiffer sanctions and perhaps refusing to even buy oil and natural gas from Russia. And what an effect that would have on Vladimir Putin if all of a sudden we canceled our purchases and other people in the European Union, other allies, did the same.
Yeah, we have to recognize that that is what funds the Russian government and what funds the Russian military is mostly that oil and natural gas. There's been a lot of bipartisan support, even just in the last few days, where there have been a bipartisan bill in the United States Senate calling for that ban on Russian oil. And recognizing, I think, that the challenge, the administration has been very slow to respond to this. They're worried, of course, that it will further jack up the prices of gas and oil, and that will have an impact on American citizens. And they're already frustrated with that just because of inflation. But I think the thing we have to look at is more of an and approach. Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia is the lead sponsor of the bill. And he said, look, this is an and moment, A-N-D. Yes, we can cut off that flow of cash to Vladimir Putin by not taking that oil and paying for that in U.S. dollars. And we can still be responsible in terms of our care for the environment. No one should be thinking that Vladimir Putin is sitting around the Kremlin thinking about how he can be more conscious of the climate and the environment in the oil that he's sending around the world. And so it is one of those moments where we have to reject the fake fight and the false choice that's often presented in Washington, D.C., and say, look, we can cut off that oil, we can produce our own, we can restore and move forward on those critical pipelines. We can also make sure sure we are approving leases for natural gas, and we can do it in a way that is green, that is clean, that is responsible for the future. And I think that's the one thing that I wish the president would reject, these fake fights and false choices of it's either climate or providing the energy that we need and our allies need around the world as we try to combat this.
I heard you on your program talk about that. Believe me, compared to how we produce oil and other responsible allies are producing their oil and natural gas, I mean, we are Mr. Clean compared to the way probably Vladimir Putin is permitting right now. The other thing that has intrigued me, Boyd, is the fact that we're talking about drilling pipelines and everything in order to perhaps facilitate the idea of not buying Vladimir Putin's oil anymore, and it's bipartisan support, at least to a degree.
Yeah, there's a lot of bipartisan. All my sources in D.C. are saying, look, this can be done. This would pass in the United States Senate, would pass in the House. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, also agreed that banning all Russian oil is a good thing and something we should do as a country. And so it's a little interesting that the administration is kind of being slow to the party on this one. Again, I think they're worried about the short-term additional impact in terms of the price of oil and gas to Americans, again, who were already frustrated well before the outbreak in Ukraine about what they were paying at the pump. And so I think the administration needs to take a hard look at that one. If nothing else, this is a symbolic move that could really set the rest of the world and galvanize Europe. Because remember, a year ago, the United States was a net exporter of energy. And if we had kept up that pace, we could have told our allies in Europe, we can help with that natural gas. We can help with that oil as we cut off from Vladimir Putin. So I think we missed an opportunity over the course of the last year. I think the administration could lead out and say, we are going to get back in that game, and we're going to do it responsibly with an eye towards the future and what we can do to be sustainable for the long haul.
Boyd, as always, thank you for joining us on Sunday Edition. We'll look forward to future conversations. Coming up next, we'll talk with Evan McMullin. Stay with us. With everything unfolding, of course, in Ukraine and the upcoming Senate election here in the state of Utah, Senator Mike Lee now facing several challengers, including Evan McMullin, there are certain ads that are running right now. There are certain accusations that are happening, and we thought that we would contact both Senator Lee and Evan McMullin. Senator Lee has promised that he will get back with us very soon, but he did give us a statement to read. But we have Evan McMullin, who is running for that Senate seat on Sunday Edition today. First of all, Mr. McMullin, thank you so much for joining us. And let's talk about the ad that you're running right now. What motivated this kind of a broadside shot at Senator Lee?
Well, look, I think we've got to have leaders who are committed to our values and whose representation of us in Congress, in this case in the U.S. Senate, reflects those values. And in the case of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a terrible, terrible development that I think most of us are united in opposing and wanting to see a speedy resolution that saves as many lives as possible to. Most of us are seeing this and wishing that it hadn't ever happened. And I think one of the problems is that many of our leaders have appeased Vladimir Putin for decades now. And really, it's been people of both parties. It's been administrations of both parties, other political leaders of both parties. And I think that we've got to have some accountability on those issues. Mike Lee, in particular, has, he was one of only 2 senators in 2017 to vote against sanctions on Russia. Then a year or 2 later, he flew to Moscow to discuss lifting sanctions with the Kremlin. And since then, since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, Mike Lee has voted multiple times against supplying military aid to the Ukrainians so that they could fight off the Russians. In total, in the last, or since 2014, he's voted against almost $2 billion worth of military aid that was in the pipeline for Ukraine. And so, it's a problem. And we can't have this kind of Vladimir Putin appeasement, certainly not from a senator from our state. This is a state that was founded by people like my ancestors and the ancestors of many others here who fled persecution, who fled violent threats from people who wanted to deny them their basic freedoms. And they arrived here in Utah, and we have a state that was founded upon the quest for liberty, the quest for freedom. So our leaders need to reflect that value, and Mike Lee has not.
When he voted against those sanctions in 2017, I want to get this right, he labeled the sanctions as costly, ineffective, and it prompts progressive politics. Perhaps you could give us your thoughts on that.
Well, I think I would love to hear him explain how exactly sanctioning Vladimir Putin and his regime promotes progressive policies. I mean, if anything, it's the other way around. Not standing up to Putin promotes the threats to liberty that we now see in Eastern Europe committed by Russian forces under the leadership of Vladimir Putin. And to say that they're ineffective, well, my goodness, look what's happened, because we've failed to draw a hard line in the sand here with Vladimir Putin. We failed to stand up to him, and because of that, he's committed this aggression. And it's not the only place where he's done that. He's done it elsewhere in Eastern Europe. Now we're seeing civilians killed, and over 1 million people have fled their homes in Ukraine to try to find safety elsewhere. I mean, my goodness. I mean, I think it's clear now that we needed to do more and that we should have done more. And an argument otherwise just holds no water at this point. We're living it. We're seeing it. And of course, so are Ukrainians with their own lives.
Keep us strong.
It's interesting, over this last week, it's hard to find someone in our country and even around in the free world, at least Europe and elsewhere, who do not believe not only in sanctions, but want them even to go deeper and be more hurtful toward Vladimir Putin and his oligarch friends over in Russia. One thing that I also, and you bring this up in the commercial that I've referred to, and that is the idea that 2 years after voting against the sanctions for Vladimir Putin, that Senator Lee did travel to Moscow. Was that an issue? Many senators, I suppose, have traveled to Moscow over the years.
They do, and there's nothing wrong with traveling to meet foreign leaders and to represent the United States. The problem is the substance of their discussions, right? And it's interesting how that trip happened too. Lee was supposed to travel with some other senators. Moscow denied the visas of all of the other senators who Lee was going to travel with, but they made an exception, and that was for Senator Lee. For some reason, they thought it was okay to roll out the red carpet for him, but to deny the other senators, which they were of both parties, by the way. It was supposed to be a bipartisan trip. The Russians denied the other senators of both parties, but rolled out the red carpet for Senator Lee. Now, it's not a surprise that they did that, given that he had voted against sanctions a year or two earlier. And Senator Lee said he was going to talk about religious liberty, but then we found out after the fact, when the Russians reported about the meeting, that instead they had talked about lifting sanctions. And in fact, Senator Lee didn't deny that after the meeting and when he was asked about it. So that's the issue. It's the substance of the meetings, the purpose of the trip, and that he, while seeing his other colleagues denied visas, would still accept a visa and accept that kind of treatment without his fellow senators. He should have known right away that there was a problem.
Evan McMullin, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show, and we'll look forward to more conversations. And as I have already mentioned, we did reach out to Senator Lee. He was unable to join us right now, did send us a statement, which I'll read here in a moment, but has promised that he will join us here on Sunday Edition before too long. So again, Evan, thank you for joining us. We're going to bring up on the screen right now the message that was sent to us by Senator Lee, and I'll read it here. Sanctions are complex issues, and international relations move quickly. As recently as mid-January, a bipartisan group of senators voted down sanctions on Russia that Senator Lee supported. After Latter-day Saint missionaries were imprisoned in Russia, and upon the invitation of then Ambassador John Huntsman Jr., Senator Lee went to Russia to make the case for Utah businesses and religious liberty. In a meeting with a member of the Russian legislature that was focused on religious liberty issues, the Russian officials advocated for a reduction in sanctions. Senator Lee summarily dismissed this request and stated significant improvements in Russian policy, diplomacy, and behavior would be required before a reduction in sanctions would be considered. Senator Lee stands with the people suffering from Putin's aggression in Ukraine. He condemns this senseless, unprovoked violence, and he is committed to keeping Americans safe. His record in the Senate shows his strong commitment to national security. We appreciate Senator Lee getting back to us, but as I mentioned, we do look forward to having him and his response to our previous conversation in an episode of Sunday Edition coming up very, very soon. Thank you so much for being with us. And coming up in just a moment, we are going to be checking in with actually where I'm sitting right now, my state senator, Jani Iwamoto, who rather surprised a lot of people in our district here by saying that she was not going to seek another seat in the Utah State Senate. We'll talk with Senator Iwamoto coming up next. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the show that many of us, where I am sitting right now, this is the Senate district, and our senator is Jani Iwamoto. And I found out earlier this week that she would be retiring from the Senate, not seeking re-election. So, of course, we put in the phone call to our senator here in Holiday. And Jani, welcome to Sunday Edition. And my question is, why? Why are you choosing not to run again?
Well, it was a hard decision for me but I, did a lot of things that I'm proud of and hopefully represented my district well. This was a good year. I passed all my bills, got appropriations, but, I thought about running a race that I ran hard, and also I work. People don't realize, but you work all through the year to get your bills to where you want them, and so I just decided that, my mom is going to be 93. She'd hate me for saying that on the air, but, and my family has been really supportive. And I just thought life is short and I wanted to, spend some quality time. But I am still here till January, and I'll still stay involved in our community and hopefully keep seeing you.
Thank you. Is there an heir apparent to your seat, someone that you would like to get behind and support?
Well, I have such a great district. Of course, it's now not District 4, but District 14, and it changed a bit. There's not as much as Salt Lake City, and it goes all the way into Murray, and I love that. Today is the deadline at 5 p.m., and we'll see who gets in, but I would hate to jump in until, the party decides, or the primary decides who that person will be, because I'm pretty sure I'll know a lot of them. So I wish them all the best.
Exactly. Jani mentioned this afternoon, as we are recording this, it is Friday, and so that deadline is just a matter of an hour or so away as we are recording this. Jani, let's look back, especially on this year's session. How do you feel that it's gone in general? And you mentioned you've been successful with your bills. What were the highlights for you?
Yeah, so, it's the end of session. We had a lot of different funds of money this year, but I'll tell you, it was very stressful. Even though we had a lot of money, there were a lot more asks, and we did some different things. Like in economic development, we have always had a lot of asks for that. And so they did something different where they funded some things, but they made a pot of money, I think 38 million, and then some of these appropriations vying against each other will go to that fund, and there'll be more a competitive thing. We've done a lot with, I think, education has been at the forefront. There's some bills that may take away from that fund that I've not supported. And then we've had a lot we're doing with infrastructure, and this year a lot with water. And I've loved to do water bills throughout the last few years, doing water banking, which was really great, that can be all used to help the Great Salt Lake. But there were a lot of environmental water issues that came up this year. So,
You are in the, I was just going to mention that, Jani, of course, you are a Democrat. You're in the minority party here in the state of Utah. Do you have any frustrations and the relationship between Republicans and Democrats on Utah's Capitol Hill? Just any thoughts, and what are some of the maybe bits of advice that you would pass on to whomever takes your place?
I'm in leadership, and I have to say our Republican and Democrat leadership has worked so well together. We communicate with each other, have weekly meetings, have been very, we had started off and we missed our minority leader, Karen Mean, and everyone banded together with the Republican caucus and supporting her. But, I had 13 bills. I did pass all my bills and this year, and they were good bills with, different affordable housing and, one duty to report and intervene, some police reform and water legislation. And it's been a really good year. A lot of appropriations have been funded. I know some have been disappointed, but I think it's been, of course, you're talking to me when the final hours of session comes, and sometimes those scary bills show up at the end. We had some in the COVID issues that have come up, and we had banning books, different types of books, and for pornography, which of course no one agrees with that, but there's other issues of, sanitizing our education that we give, my feeling. But now we will be doing some more divisive, maybe not as issues that may come out as far as transgender in sports for children. And, we still don't know what that final bill will look like, and that's coming out tonight. But overall, we work together very well. We pass bills together and policy and work together, and probably 95% of the time we all work together. A lot of us, I do Republican bills that they've asked me to sponsor, so other people have too. We work all bipartisanly most all the time. So it's
Sure.
Yeah.
Jani, unfortunately, we are out of time. I thank you on short notice joining us here on Sunday Edition. Thank you for your service in our Utah State Legislature, our Senate, and I'll look forward to continued conversations. And that does it today for Sunday Edition. It's good to be back. Thank you for being back with us, and Music and the Spoken Word is coming up next.